All right, good morning, everybody. Today is Tuesday, July 7th, 2015, and this is Before the First Cup of Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is 72 degrees and partly sunny here in upstate New York. Looks like we're probably going to have a little bit of rain today, but I'm not complaining because we don't have snow, and that's all that matters. So yesterday, Monday, we ended up having a cluster of a show, so there didn't end up being one because of technical difficulties and check disks that happened in the middle of the show, having to scan 36,000 files. So we're going to start nice, fresh, and new from Tuesday morning. On Friday, we did an interview with Mr. Brandon Turville and titled the show Divide and Conquer. We talked a lot about Greece and about the Confederate flag and all the things that were so yesterday already that have gotten stupid people to start paying attention to things that they shouldn't be paying attention to. One of the things I want to get back to today, though, we ended the show looking at some of the NSA spying tools. And honestly, I don't remember what it was called. It was called X something, but it's way down in my feed, where they literally could just plug in an email address and then be able to get into your computer, take remote control, scan all of your stuff, and see exactly what you're doing. It's way worse than we ever imagined, and it's a really nice, secret, easy database that they all have access to. Well, along those same lines, I want to get over to Albright with the dark web and Silk Road. There was a story that we talked about a month or two ago in regards to after they had sentenced Albright to life in prison without parole. Reason Magazine had posted a story about the verdict, and one of the things that happened is that some people had put some pretty unsavory comments onto the story itself, saying some things about the judge of what they'd like to see happen to her. But here's what happened, and right now I am not in a position to be able to play clips because I'd love to be able to play this clip for you, but maybe what I'll do is insert it in so you can hear it. But here's the gist of the situation. Basically, they received a Department of Justice subpoena demanding that they provide the identities of the individuals who posted those comments on the story anonymously because they want to go after them. They face, and if I remember the story correctly, it was 20 years in prison for threatening a federal judge, and they were only putting things, I don't know, we talked about it, I don't want to repeat them on air, but there are just things that people put when they get pissed off about something and put it into the comments of a story. Does not mean that they're going to show up on your doorstep and act upon those things. So again, with this being professionally appalled, and everybody just with this oversensitivity to everything, I think that they really are grooming us to be overly sensitive so then they can crack down on laws. I mean, I just saw something the other day that was talking about the internet now being all about hate speech, and we got to crack down on hate speech because anyone who speaks out against the Jews or anyone who speaks out against the politicians or anyone who speaks out against anybody on the internet, that pesky internet, is spewing hate speech. And oh God, the Constitution, what? According to Cuomo's kid, Chris Cuomo, who's on CNN now, the Constitution does not protect hate speech. Well, I hate to tell you, Chris Cuomo, because hate speech, whether you like it or not, or whether or not it's hate, might be hate to you, but it's not hate to another person, is subjective, and free speech is protected, regardless of not if it hurts your feelings. So, anyway, back to the story on Reason.com. So they're demanding that they provide them information on these anonymous commenters for the Department of Justice to go after them for threatening a federal judge. So how ridiculous is that? If anybody is putting comments out there still on the internet, on Facebook, on any of the surveillance tools that might get you into trouble, don't tempt fate, because I'm telling you, they are coming after anybody who has an individualized thought, who's going to have enough balls to put it out there in public. One of the other stories I want to talk about too, so alright, great. So you think you're so smart, and you think that you've managed to clean your tracks and be able to be anonymous, whether you're coming through hidemyass.com or some sort of VPN, or you think you might have anonymity. Well, guess what? We've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. There is no anonymity on the internet. There never was. There never will be. Remember, DARPA had something to do with building the internet to begin with, and any of these tools that are out there, including Tor, for being able to hide your location. Tor has lots of code that came from some of the original Android code that came from some of the alphabet agencies. So again, there's always a toe in the pie, and don't think that you're going to get away with being able to hide. So a story came out in phys.org on June 29th titled, "Most Internet Anonymity Software Leaks Users' Details." Ding ding, there you go. Virtual private networks, I'm going to read the story, are legal, and increasingly popular. Now, mind you, I've been using a VPN since the mid-90s, and that's typically how, if you were working remotely for a job at a corporation, you would use a VPN to encrypt your data from point to point so no one could sniff your data, but you would have a secure tunnel into the network that you were working on. Virtual private networks, but anyway, so they seem to think that these are new, maybe to some people who've never used them before. They're publicly accessible now. Virtual private networks, VPNs, are legal and increasingly popular for individuals wanting to circumvent censorship, avoid mass surveillance, or access geographically limited services like Netflix and BBC iPlayer. Used by around 20% of the European internet users, they encrypt users' internet communications, making it more difficult for people to monitor their activities. And remember, there is a big fat firewall now that is filtering traffic in and out of the UK, and I'm sure other European nations. And I also have heard that they're doing the same thing in Australia. I wouldn't doubt that they had some sort of filtering already going on here in the U.S. How many times have I said or typed a few keywords and all of a sudden I get the error message that says DNS internet not found? It's amazing how that happens with a few of the same words over and over again. Back to the story. The study of 14 popular VPN providers has found that 11 of them leaked information about users because of a vulnerability known as IPv6 leakage, not anal leakage, IPv6 leakage. The leaked information ranged from a website's let me start again. The leaked information ranged from the websites a user is accessing to the actual content of the user communications. For example, comments being posted on forums, ding ding, like Reason Magazine. Interactions with websites running HTTPS encryption, which include financial transactions, were not leaked. The leakage occurs because network operators are increasingly deploying a new version of the protocol used to run the internet called IPv6. IPv6 replaces the previous IPv4, but many VPNs only protect users' IPv4 traffic. And one note on IPv6, the reason why the internet and the core routers of the internet need to move to IPv6 over IP version 4 is because, in all essence, IP version 4 is running out of internet IP addresses with everything in the world going online, like your smart home and all of your smart devices, soon to be every cell in your body. The researchers tested their ideas by choosing 14 of the most famous VPN providers and connecting various devices to a Wi-Fi access point, which was designed to mimic the attacks hackers might use. Researchers attempted two kinds of attacks that might be used to gather data. One is passive monitoring, simply collecting the unencrypted information that passed through the access point. And the other one is DNS hijacking. Hey, doesn't that sound like what I keep getting on my computer? Redirecting browsers to a controlled web server and pretending to be commonly visited websites like Google and Facebook. Now, one other thing, if you are ever on a public network and you think that you're logging into something secure and you're sitting at Dunkin' Donuts on their free Wi-Fi, guess what? Nothing that you're doing is secure, and anything that's passing through that router can be passively monitored. That is the end point. See, if you're doing a VPN at home, you know that at least on your end, your router is secure, and you're hoping on the other end, your bank, your corporation that you VPN into, you know that they're secure, so your tunnel from end to end will be secure. But if you're sitting at an unsecure endpoint, like a coffee shop, or you're sitting in downtown somewhere where they're offering you free Wi-Fi, and then you're connecting to work or your bank, when that information from work or your bank gets passed back to you to that public router that typically has no encryption on it, that typically is wide open so anyone can sniff packets, they can get you. If they're running some sort of packet sniffer on that router, they could be pulling all of your information, your passwords, your financial data. So have half a brain. Don't go sitting in a coffee shop in Amsterdam and logging into your email and then going, holy shit, how did my account get hacked? Because that's exactly what happens. All right, back to the story. The study also examined the security of various mobile platforms when using VPN and found that they were much more secure when using something like Apple's iOS, but they were still more vulnerable to leakage when using Google's Android. Now, let me mention something about Apple's iOS that we talked about before. We saw an interview with the director of DARPA. I don't remember her name now, but she was doing an interview and discussed how Siri, which is your voice-activated application that's running on your iPhone, Siri is a DARPA creation. So none of the software is safe. You have a piece of DARPA software running on your Apple iOS, how secure is that phone going to be, okay? So I don't care what they say. Dr. Gareth Tyson, a lecturer from QMUL and author of the study, said, quote, that there are a variety of reasons why someone might want to hide their identity online, and it is worrying that they might be vulnerable despite using a service that is specifically designed to protect them. Yes, how worrying is it, though, that they don't want anyone to be anonymous, because anonymous equals danger. Anonymous equals ISIS under every freaking bed. That pesky internet radicalizing our children who are antisocial and live in their parents' basement. So the next thing that we're going to see, we already know the Apple iPhone uses biometrics for access. You can use a fingerprint, a thumbprint, or people were using nipple prints to get in. I saw that they were already working on something for Android, and remember, new Windows 10 that they're giving away for free to everybody is going to have some sort of biometric password as well. Well, once you have to log into the internet using biometrics, you will never ever be anonymous, no matter how much you think you are. They know your endpoint and they know your authentication. You've proven that it's you using your eye print or your thumbprint or your facial 230-point facial recognition to get in. So there's no doubt that it's you. So even if you're not using your first and last name when posting comments, threatening judges because of some verdict, telling them that you hope that they burn in hell, apparently is a threat against a judge too that could put you in jail for 20 years, you're not going to be anonymous. Okay, back to the story. Quote, we are most concerned for those people trying to protect their browsing from oppressive regimes. Like where in the United States? They could be emboldened by their supposed anonymity while actually revealing all their data and online activity and exposing themselves to possible repercussions. Like where? In the United States? Yes, I think so. I think so. Oppressive regimes, I think that we are going to see our internet, and I think for a while here, they're still going to make you believe that you're anonymous, and they're still going to get you to go out and speak your mind, but don't think that they're not bagging and tagging every word that you say, and every post that you make, and every friend that you contact and have a conversation with for future use. And I think that's the end of the story. All right, so what's the end result of that? The end result is you are never, ever, ever anonymous, nor were you, nor will you ever be. Don't go to Silk Road and buy drugs using your Bitcoin, because guess what? They're going to get you. At some point, they're going to get you. And, hey, by the way, Torrent, if you go out and you're still hitting up torrents and you're downloading free copyrighted material, when we talked about this last week, I actually went out and did a few searches because I had known back at the time I had read into it, they were already capturing IPs and MAC addresses and tracking down who the people were that they were going to come after at some point in the future for copyright fines. And the story that I read, it said, and this was already back in like 2008, within 3 hours they would have all your addresses and your locations. I would have to imagine today in 2015 is probably in 3 minutes they know where you are and what you've downloaded and how much it's going to cost you if they ever need some leverage against you to come at you and make you pay your $10 million in fines for downloading Mystery Science Theater 3000. So just be aware of that. Do not go out and use any of those services under the guise that you think that you are anonymous, because it is not going to happen. All right, unless, I don't know, I mean, there might be some super freaky new thing that you paid bazillions of dollars for you and your endpoint. We did see something like that for encrypted communications. You and your friend can pay a couple $1,000s a year to have both of your cell phones encrypted. Or I thought, too, that there were some cell phones that came with encrypted chips in them, but you and the person on the other end needed to have the same keys, just like we have keys for encryption on wireless routers, and there's all the different levels. Well, the cell phones would be doing the same thing, but if you're going to send encrypted data across one end of the pipe, you need to have the key to decrypt that data on the other end of the pipe. So it has to be on both ends that have that same encryption, decryption for it to work. And you're going to pay some big bucks for that. And you know what? Always look into who was responsible for writing that software. Look into where they worked before and who their friends are and what technological boards that they're sitting on, because I'm telling you, all these people are slimy, butt-slapping, back-patting scumbags that, you know what, your data is a gold mine, and people want to pay big money to know what you're doing, who you're talking to, where you're going, what you buy, what you look at. So, you know, I know you don't think that you're doing anything wrong because you're just clicking around on the internet reading things, but I'll tell you what, I am sure that there is somebody that would pay big money for your browsing habits. All right, let's get to this next story. Digital amnesia, quote unquote, on the rise as we outsource our memory to the web. Now, we originally talked about this when we were looking at that augmented reality and some of the stuff that they're planning on in the future. Step number 1 was Google Glass, where you have the ability to get your directions and blink your eyes and see data in the corner of your computer glasses. Step number 2 is going to be some sort of hippocampus implant using air compression to put this little chip in your head, and they're going to use it as your digital assistant. And remember, we watched that whole TED Talk. Oh, SLC gave us that video probably 6 to 8 months ago. This is what they're planning, and you know, you puny human brains don't have enough storage space left in there anymore to be able to remember when, you know, you're supposed to go to the next birthday party. So don't worry about it, because the computer will remember for you. It is like a digital personal assistant in your head. And eventually, one of the things that they talked about in that TED Talk that was probably the most disturbing of all was that eventually they were going to be injecting these chips into the hippocampus at birth. So thank God, because These computer chips will be able to know everything about you from day one of your birth all the way through, and it's going to be like a best friend in your head. Wow, we should all be excited and invest in that technology. Not. All right, so anyway, this digital amnesia is already happening because we depend too much on the internet and our cell phones to remember things for us, like phone numbers. It says our over-reliance on devices and the internet is starting to have a serious impact. And yes, Devo had it right when they talked about de-evolution, but we are devolving as we offload things that, I don't know, made us good hunter-gatherers, like remembering where the animals came through and when and what the stars looked like when was the best time of harvest, kept you alive in the days of survival, and now we've offloaded all of these relevant details, and every day more and more things with technology become irrelevant because, hey, we don't need to survive. We go to the grocery store now. Hey, we don't need to remember phone numbers. Like, I used to know every phone number, all my credit card numbers, all by heart. But guess what? I don't need to know any of those anymore because they're all in this nifty little surveillance device that I keep in my pocket. All right, so back to the story. As anyone who can remember the world before the internet age will tell you, finding out information about pretty much anything these days is a hell of a lot easier than it used to be. But all of this convenience afforded by digital technologies and their capacity to instantaneously provide us with answers could be taking a terrible toll on our natural abilities to memorize and recall things, according to a new study by the software firm Kaspersky Labs. And here's another thing to think about. Your brain is a muscle. I mean, it's not literally a muscle like your bicep, but your brain is a muscle that requires exercise. And I remember as a kid when we would go on summer vacation. If I didn't do anything mental over my summer vacation, I didn't read, I didn't write, I did nothing but watch TV and run around and play, go down to the beach, drink beer and party. You know what? By the time I got back to school in September, it took me some ramp-up time to get my brain back to where it was by the end of the school year, having to make sure I was on top of things every day. And that's exactly what happens to your brain, is what happens to your biceps or your pecs or your stomach muscles when you've been exercising and you stop. It gets lazy and it gets flabby. All right, back to the story. Digital amnesia, quote-unquote, which the researchers define as forgetting information that we trust to digital devices to store and remember it on our behalf, appears to be a problem for both young and old alike, with 91.2% of respondents to a U.S. survey indicating that they, quote, use the internet as an online extension of their brain, unquote. Transhumanism, here we come. What's worse, our reliance on the all-seeing, all-knowing internet is making us lazy too. Approximately 50% of all consumers surveyed said that they would turn on the internet before ever trying to remember a particular fact. I mean, oh my God, how disgusting and how horrible have things become. We won't even try to remember. We got to look at the internet first. I mean, this weekend I watched Mark Dice had a new video out. If you haven't seen it, you have to. Go out to his YouTube channel, and it's called something about fail. Americans don't know why we celebrate the 4th of July or something like that. It was one of the most disturbing Mark Dice petition signing, questioning things that I've ever seen. There was nobody in his line of people that he had asked, why, who do we break away from for independence, that we were celebrating Independence Day? What was the year that we inked our independence? Nobody, United States citizens, had any idea as to why we were celebrating Independence Day. The only person at the very end that came out with the right answer was an Italian tourists. So tell me that is not horrible, and these people weren't allowed to ask anyone for help or look at their cell phones. It was just unbelievable. You've got to see that, because if there's any question in your mind that the United States is like going down the tubos, that would be it. All right, back to the story, if I can find it. Oh, here we go. So what's worse, our reliance on the all-seeing, all-knowing internet is making us lazy too. Approximately 50% of all consumers surveyed said they would turn on the internet before ever trying to remember a particular fact, and more than 1 in 4 people are happy to instantly forget something gleaned from an online result as soon as they've made use of it. So tell me that isn't like a really easy way to be able to do whatever you want as far as an underhanded, dubious government, let's say. If you're forgetting facts the second after you're done using them, you will never be able to connect point A to point B to point C and go, holy shit, we're being duped. Oh, this is wonderful. When I bet it's all a big DARPA experiment somewhere along the way. Alright, let's get back here. It says, of course, not every little thing we have caused to Google is a precious memory worth preserving forever, but even so, it's clear the culture of instant search engine gratification, and we've talked about that instant gratification society that we live in today. Everything is disposable, and everybody needs gratification now. They can't wait until tomorrow or earn something. They have to take it or spend beyond their means to get it. It's clear that the culture of instant search engine gratification is effectively training our brains to treat all sorts of information like some sort of disposable snack. Yes, we are the world of disposable. Don't take care of it. Throw it away and get a new one. And the ramifications could be potentially serious. Quote, past research has repeatedly demonstrated that actively recalling information is a very efficient way to create a permanent memory. In contrast, so that's actively recalling. That is using your brain, tying one fact to the next, using association to be able to connect ideas so that they form a thought pattern versus somebody drilling you with standardized tests over and over and over again to remember something that you don't even see the context as to why you're remembering it. Passive repeating. So in contrast, passively repeating information, i.e. by repeatedly looking up things on the internet, in this case, does not create a solid, lasting memory trace in the same way in the brain. Based on this research, it can be argued that the trend to look up information before ever trying to recall it prevents the buildup of long-term memories and thus makes us process information merely on a shallow, moment-to-moment basis. And you know what? Don't think that isn't by design, because absolutely that's by design. You know what? If you just remember things in a very shallow way, that means by next year, hey, you'll have forgotten about them losing $2.3 trillion the day before 9/11 and the quote-unquote airplane hit the accounting office at the Pentagon. You forgot all about it. Not that the news is all negative. Oh, of course not. Our ability to forget inconsequential factoids is actually a way for our brains to optimize the recollection of things that we really think are important. Even in healthy young people, research shows that being able to forget currently irrelevant or outdated information makes us more efficient at encoding new information, says Wimbler. And I say bullshit to that, because even if you have outdated information on your brain, shouldn't you be using that as some sort of foundation to then build the new facts upon? It's not like, we're talking about revisionist history here. If you completely forget something that's become obsoleted and it just erases itself from your brain, how is that going to figure now for in the future? Because you're not going to remember the mistakes of the past. Like this whole Confederate flag bullshit that's going on right now. Let's erase the Confederate flag from all of history, because some people have their feelings hurt over looking at a fucking symbol. You know, once they make that go away, what, are we going to then go into every online encyclopedia and also erase the Civil War? You know, are they then going to push for, well, any revolutionary activities? How about our founding fathers? Us revolting against England and breaking away? Well, maybe we should get rid of that too, because you know what? That hurts some feelings as well. And this is bullshit. This is absolute bullshit. But hey, they say it's a good thing to forget anything that's become irrelevant or outdated in our past. Let's just erase it all with a big eraser. To me, that is 1984 upside down and backwards. That's like someone telling you to forget that Pluto was ever considered a planet. And guess what? I never forgot Pluto was considered a planet. I taught my kid Pluto was a planet, and now they're talking about making Pluto a planet again. So there you go. Alright, anyway, use this as a cautionary reminder to at least think of a little bit more about the way we seek out and use information found online. If stuff is not at all important, why do we feel so badly the need to Google it? Well, I don't know. Because you want to learn things. Doesn't matter if it's important or not. There might be little keys to the puzzle, and without the keys to the puzzle, you'll never figure the whole thing out. Regardless or not, if it's irrelevant. It might be irrelevant today, but I bet you it won't be tomorrow. Alright. Couple more stories staying on the brain theme that I wanted to look at. There was a story that came out in April. Actually, there were a couple stories. There was one that I saw that said 70% of all Americans are on prescription drugs, and number 2 of all those prescription drugs were antidepressants. Well, then I saw a story in April 3rd, 2015. 70% of people on antidepressants don't even have depression. What? Yes, Big Pharma's making out big, fat, and juicy. Says if sales for antidepressants such as Zoloft, Lexapro, and Prozac tell us anything, it's that depression is sweeping the nation, but a new study questions the validity of most of these sales. The study has found that a majority of individuals on antidepressants, a whopping 69%, do not even meet the criteria for clinical depression. These individuals are likely just experiencing normal sadness, which again, everybody's feelings. We have to be so concerned about everybody's feelings. And oh, you broke up with a boyfriend and you're sad. Well, we can't make you feel sad. You shouldn't feel sad. Here, take this pill. Oh, what? You're being picked on because you have skinny legs. Oh, well, you shouldn't have to feel upset about that or angry. Here, take a pill. Everything is take a pill. Bullshit. You know what? Get a thick skin and learn to stand on your own 2 feet and be an adult, okay? You don't need to take a pill because you're sad. Get over it. Do some art therapy. Go to the beach. Sniff a flower. Get a cat. You don't need a pill. These individuals are likely just experiencing normal sadness and hardships that most of us experience. You know, what makes me so disgusted is if you go back to like our great-grandparents who worked their asses off, who did 18-hour days and learned to build a life for themselves, to work hard, to make money, to have a family, and to grow. And then the next generation who worked in manufacturing, who all worked hard and they were successful and middle class. You know, we don't know how to work hard as a society anymore. It is an entire generation of narcissistic, I don't even know what you'd call them, entitled, spoiled brats is what we've raised that can't have their feelings hurt. This lefty freaking bawling my eyes out. I'm so freaking perfect and smart and you better listen to me and I'm going to walk out of high school and become a CEO of my own corporation. And holy shit, after we convince mommy and daddy to spend $300,000 on our college education, I can't get a fucking job. Well, I wonder why. Nobody knows what it's like to work hard anymore in this country. It has been bred out of us. We've been bred to be dependent little fucking babies. Alright, continuing on. And then they give us drugs to boot. And wait, the next story, wait till you even see, it even gets worse than this. In addition to finding that nearly 2/3 of all antidepressant takers don't meet the criteria for depression, The researchers also note how 38% of those taking antidepressants for other psychiatric disorders also do not meet the criteria. These include panic disorders, obsessive-compulsive disorders, social phobias, general anxieties, and a number of other arguably fabricated mental disorders. I don't know about that. I know people who have obsessive-compulsive disorder, and I don't think that that's a fabricated mental disorder. It's something that you can learn to control yourself, but I don't think that's fabricated. So, all right, well, I'm not going to totally agree with the story. Alright, objective. Past studies have shown that many individuals who use antidepressants have no current or lifetime history of mental disorders. However, recent studies suggest that the one-time retrospective evaluation of mental disorders commonly used in such studies may substantially underestimate the true lifetime prevalence of mental disorders. And if we take a look at all the different things that we're exposed to in our lifetime, what do we discover? That taking Benadryl for more than 3 months is like a 60% increase in the future of getting dementia, right? We found out things like that, so don't think that there aren't other things out there that they're giving you. High blood pressure pills kill your liver, all these other drugs that they're giving you are causing you all these other issues. But how do we fix it? Well, you're sad. You're sad. You know what, Johnny? You didn't become the CFO of a corporation like you were groomed to believe you were going to become. You know what, Johnny? Don't be depressed. Here, why don't you just take some, Zoloft or Lexapro. I bet you'll feel better, Johnny. Don't worry about it. A few years back, Harvard conducted a study to reiterate what many in the psych profession already knew. Americans are addicted to antidepressant medication. We collectively pop Prozac, Celexa, Effexor, Paxil, and Zoloft pills like they're candy in an attempt to boost mood and feel better. The increase in sales of antidepressants is up a startling 400%. And this pill popping became the norm, even though clinical studies suggest that there are numerous natural remedies that can help us feel better without the pricey and life-altering, brain-altering chemical side effects that these drugs can cause. Unfortunately, we are fighting a partnership between the psychiatric community and doctors that exist in the background, and an astonishing 70% of the panel members of the Psychiatric Bible, the DSM-5, which is also deemed eating healthy food and the want for eating healthy food a mental disorder. You guys saw that, right? Yes, the Psychiatric Bible, known as the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, more affectionately known as the DSM, reported having financial relationships with pharmaceutical companies. 70% of the people writing the DSM have relationships with pharmaceutical companies. And if I remember correctly, we did a story probably about a year ago that was showing that all these new disorders that they were coming out with the newest revision of the DSM, they were working in conjunction with the pharmaceutical companies to figure out which drugs will fix which disorder, and many of these disorders were made up. Absolutely, completely made up. Just like most of the psychiatric science, I hate to say. But, they're not doing any measurement. I absolutely 100%, I know that there are patterns in psychology and psychiatric disorders. I have a couple friends who all have the same disorder. It's called the narcissistic disorder. And yeah, you can see that one. But some of these ridiculous ones, ADHD for children, maybe some of it's environmental, but I hate to tell you, kids are hyper. All kids are hyper. And if they're not hyper, if they're just sitting there drooling, staring at a television, then I'd say there was something wrong with them. But any inquisitive child that's going to talk endlessly and be going 1,000 miles an hour, there is nothing wrong with that child, okay? All right. Anyway, unfortunately, we are fighting a partnership between the psychiatric community and doctors that exist in the background. An astonishing 70% of the panel members of the Psychiatric Bible, known as DSM, has reported financial relationships with pharmaceutical companies, and about 57% reported ties in the previous edition, which was the DSM-4. This is just one reason pharmaceuticals are sweeping the nation. And remember, I don't want to get into it right now because we're getting near the end of the show, but go back and hit the Before the First Cup archives. I probably did 15 shows on big pharma, precision medicine, nanotech, and all the crap that's coming down the pipe. It is a money-making scheme, and you and me and our kids and Nana and Grandpa are all guinea pigs. And they are going to prey on the most desperate. And you're going to line up because, hey, guess what? They now have little self-replicating nanobots that can cure cancer. So make sure you're the first in line. All right, anyway, so let's skip now to the next story, because this is what I wanted to point out to you. So we have this large majority of people that are on these antidepressants, but a large majority of these people that are on these antidepressants aren't even depressed. But hey, we have this real cozy relationship between doctors and the pharmaceutical companies, and we knew that, but all across the board, they're prescribing things for Zoloft, Lexapro, and Prozac like they're popping candy. Well, check this out. So they did this study, and this was a recent story out of Science Alert, July 3rd, so a few days ago. Antidepressants affect people's moral behavior, study finds. Well, who would have thunk it? Moral judgments are more linked to our brain chemistry than we thought. Well, now wouldn't that explain a lot? Considering that there's a complete lack of any morals that are left in this country, people will screw their neighbor to think if they're going to get ahead, they will screw anybody. And I know so many people that have been like that in my lifetime. Well, check this out. Moral behavior is usually considered the province of philosophers and ethicists, but a new study suggests that the way we treat others is actually tied to our brain chemistry. Researchers from the University College of London have found that commonly prescribed antidepressant medication can affect people's decision-making when choosing between whether to act selfishly or selflessly. In an experiment involving 175 healthy adults, where participants had the power to both administer and receive electric shocks. I gotta love that they use the same electric shock scenario. There was that Milgram's experiment as well, but they didn't have them drugged up and giving electric shocks. Both administer and receiving electric shocks, researchers sought to investigate how much pain people were willing to inflict either on themselves or in others in exchange for money. Now, tell me if this isn't a horrifying thought. Let's continue. But it wasn't just a straight study to determine who would act selfishly and who wouldn't. Half of the group were randomly selected to receive the serotonin-enhancing antidepressant citalopram, citalopram, while the other half were given a dopamine booster, levodopa, which is what we just read about as one of the ones in that last story, used in treating Parkinson's. Now, if you remember anything about a show that we did, probably 2-3 months ago, where I really dug in deep into dopamine, psychopaths, different behaviors that cause your body to produce dopamine, different behaviors then that cause you to need more dopamine, video games, addictions, cocaine, alcohol, sex, anything like that causes you to produce dopamine. The more dopamine that you produce over and over again, the more dopamine your body needs, and they're finding now in these serial video game players that their brain structures and in particular, the dopamine section of their brain has grown and requires more dopamine for them to be normal, and their brains now resemble that of a psychopath. We are creating psychopaths, people. Well, I guess that there's an antidepressant that also boosts dopamine. So an antidepressant that creates what? Psychopaths. And they use it to treat Parkinson's. That's great. It says each group receiving medication was then compared against a group that received only a placebo. The two medications had a marked impact on the dilemma facing the quote-unquote decider group, which were the participants given control over the electric shocks, and essentially how many shocks they should inflict on themselves and on another in order to maximize a cash reward, with more zaps equaling a better financial return. The researchers found that among the deciders in the zapping experiment, those receiving a one-off dose of the citalopram were willing to pay almost twice as much to prevent harm to themselves or others. So the ones that were receiving the serotonin-enhancing antidepressant, and you can boost your serotonin levels by getting a good night's sleep, they would pay up to twice as much to prevent anyone from being injured. But in comparison, the zappers on the levodopa, which is the dopamine-boosting antidepressant, acted more selfishly and displayed a preference for harming others for cash reward. Now, if you take a look, and we've talked many times about how when I used to work in distribution, and it had to be now 20 years ago, but when I first realized it was right at 18 years, when I first saw the very first video game ever in the world skewed on our system that had the manufacturer as the Department of Defense. And we all raised an eyebrow and said, why the hell is the Department of Defense putting out video games? And in the very beginning, it was the flying 3D, aircraft ones, and then later they came out with shoot-'em-up first persons. Well, if you think about it, we now have an entire generations of soldiers and drone pilots, and guess what? It's the same activity that happens. You have this dopamine, this need for dopamine, and your body produces more dopamine to make you the psychopath. Same sorts of brains as psychopathic brains. And what do they find out in the research? By dopamine boosting, you have a preference for harming others for cash reward. Well, hey, your parents can't afford $200,000 to send you to college, Johnny. Here's the little dangling carrot. Why don't we send you over to Afghanistan to blow up the terrorists? I mean, this is pretty horrible. The implications of this are pretty horrible. And guess what, Johnny? We'll give you money to go to college if you don't get blown up in Afghanistan. Our findings have implications for the potential lines of treatment for antisocial behavior as they help us understand how serotonin and dopamine affect people's willingness to harm others for personal gain, says Molly Crockett, the lead author of the research. It's the medication, guys, in the video games. We wonder why every time we see some mass shooting, we always find out that the kid that took the AR-15 and blew away half the school was on SSRIs. Gee, who would have thunk it? We also discovered that anyone who's taking one of those SSRIs that has a suppressed cytochrome P450 enzyme has a tendency for violence. We then discovered further in our research that by eating GMO foods and anything that's treated with glyphosate, aka Roundup, has a suppressed cytochrome P450 enzyme. The deck is completely stacked against us. Psychopaths. We have created psychopaths through our food, through the games, and your computing devices that now you apparently can't live without because you can't remember anything without them, and the drugs that we're pumping into our children. These findings, published in Current Biology, follow on from another research project showing that drugs can have the effect of making people more compassionate. Which drugs are those? Studies in this area could have important ramifications for how antidepressants and other kinds of mood-altering medications are tested, with researchers arguing for a broader model that incorporates looking at the kinds of real-world behavior that medication users could demonstrate in the long term. So there you go. These drugs, especially the dopamine producers, create a bunch of freaking psychopaths running around, and we have 70% of Americans on some sort of prescription drug. And 70% of the Americans who are on antidepressants are on some sort of drug that causes either dopamine or serotonin production. Now, hopefully it's serotonin, because they pay twice as much for people not to get hurt. And you know how interesting, when you look at those two diametrically opposed groups, so there's one group that's going to pay twice as much for nobody to get hurt. And then you have the other group that's going to beg, borrow, and steal to take as much as they can and don't give a shit who they hurt. And we got these two sides here, the bleeding hearts and the psychopaths. We've created this. We have created, again, more division, all artificial this time, by pumping Americans full of drugs. It's just disgusting. All right, guys, where are we going to finish this up? I think we're going to finish this up in looking at, if I can even find it. Here we go. Stay out of the water. We've looked at so many horrible things in the water. Well, I just caught this one this weekend, and this one happened to be in freshwater if it loads. Woman dies after her headache turns out to be a brain-eating bug she caught while swimming in fresh water. A woman has died after her headache and vomiting turned out to be a rare but lethal brain-eating bug. The 21-year-old from Bishop, California died from an extremely uncommon, uncommon infection called primary amoeboic meningoencephalitis, or PAM for short. This is a rare disease of the central nervous system caused by infections from the microscopic amoeba Neisseria fowleri. The woman was infected by the amoeba, which is usually found in soil and fresh warm water when swimming in Reno, Nevada. The woman, whose identity has not been revealed by her family, died June 20th in Reno. Officials from the Inyo Public Health confirmed her death to the journalists at the paper, and the woman woke up from a nap on June 16th with symptoms including a headache, nausea, and vomiting, and a few days later her condition deteriorated until she suffered a cardiac arrest and died. She is believed to have been infected on private land, and therefore there is no risk to the general public. Though I've heard about this brain-eating amoeba a few different times in different locations. So just put on a seatbelt. Again, never before seen. You know, how amazing. These things just pop out of nowhere. Humans are infected when water containing this amoeba enters the body through the nose. I think there was one last year or the year before in Florida as well. It travels through the skull until it reaches the brain and destroys the organ's tissue. The amoeba is not thought to be infectious, as it has never been known to spread from person to person. But who knows? Stranger things have happened. The risk of contracting the disease is low, yet the stakes are high because the chances of dying once infected are almost 100%. Our next steps are to inspect the suspected sites of exposure and find out what risk factors might exist. I advise people to be cautious when using untreated hot springs in the Sierras. The best way to do this is to always keep your head above water. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, in the 10 years from 2005 to 2014, 35 infections from this amoeba were reported in the U.S. So there you go. All right, guys, we are just about out of time. It is Tuesday, so make sure you stick around. Right after this, we have Lonnie Clark sitting in for Mr. Kevin Blanche on Post-Ignorance Project. And then we have Mr. Chuck Ocelli live at 6 p.m. Eastern. JJ is going to be live at 8 p.m. Eastern talking about Freedom Palooza and telling you about all the wonderful things you missed. 9 p.m. we got Michael and Nick doing primer time. At 10 we have Dane and Russ live with Geoengineering Watch. And then at 11 we have SM Gibson on Anti-Media Radio. All right, guys, everybody have an awesome Tuesday, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow. Everybody take care.
What country famously broke away from England to start their own country in the late 1700s?
I have no idea, man. I don't know.
What are we celebrating on the 4th of July exactly?
Our independence.
A little more specific.
It's the day that we overtook the South. And it's the day that, it's our independence. That's why we have the fire.
From the South.
From the South, exactly.
So it was the victor of the Civil War?
Yes.
4th of July?
Yes.
The Declaration of Independence was signed by who?
I don't know.
Just name one person.
Abraham Lincoln? I don't know.
Sorry.
Not?
What year was that Declaration of
Was
Independence?
it 1964? 84?
1984.
84? I don't know.
No.
1864?
1860.
I don't know.
This country, no wonder this country's in trouble.
Well, you've probably heard of taking ginkgo to improve your memory or specialty app games that will help train your brain. But if those aren't good enough for you, how about a brain chip implant? That's right. The good people at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, better known as DARPA, along with researchers at UCLA and the University of Pennsylvania, have joined together to build the ultimate USB stick, if the B, of course, was for brain. This is all part of President Obama's Brain Initiative. What they're developing is implantable closed-loop systems able to deliver targeted neural stimulation that may ultimately help restore memory function. So in plain English, DARPA is working on creating a memory-enhancing microchip that would be implanted directly into your brain. Sounds pretty creepy. DARPA states that the technology is being developed in order to better combat victims of traumatic brain injuries, especially in veterans. UCLA will receive about $15 million from DARPA, while the University of Pennsylvania will be getting upwards of $22 million for the project. What do you think? Is having a better memory worth a DARPA brain implant?